Blood manipulation is easily one of the most versatile powers in Jujutsu Kaisen. Arguably, it would have infinite potential in combat scenarios, with its only drawback being the amount and consumption of blood. As a blood manipulator, you can use blood from your own body, but this would only be a double-edged sword, because as we all know, without blood in your body would no longer be able to function. And this would put a blood manipulator at a very high risk in a 1v1 scenario. And to make up for this, we see Noritoshi, who is a blood manipulator, carry around blood packs in case he ever runs out of blood, or if he needs enough blood to perform attacks that would be on a bigger scale from the last. And speaking of attacks from blood manipulation come in a very large variety, with attacks that not only benefit you offensively, but also defensively. And this causes blood manipulation to be a very balanced fighting style, especially since it has its own drawback. If it didn't have this one drawback or weakness, so to speak, then blood manipulation will be pretty overpowered. But anyway, when your opponent is out of range, you can use blood manipulation to attack them from a long distance. With piercing blood as a ranged attack, you essentially condense your blood, meaning that you concentrate it in an area and then shoot your blood at your opponent. And this attack can travel at the speed of sound. And not only that, but piercing blood can also curve so that it can hit its opponents. This allows piercing blood to be one of the most productive moves when it comes to ranged combat. But that doesn't mean that piercing blood is limited to ranged combat, but it can also be used for close combat. For instance, when Choso shoots Itadori with piercing blood, he uses the trail of the blood bullet that he just shot in order to bend it and move it into the direction where his opponent dodges, so that he can hit them even though they dodged his attack. And this allows a blood manipulator not only to have most of the control in a fight, but they can also possess the ability to adapt to nearly any given scenario in a fight. Because normally in a ranged battle, once your opponent rushes you down and breaks through your defense, you will no longer be able to fight them back. But by using the trail of your piercing blood, you can defend yourself in that scenario, so that you have multiple options, unlike your opponent, who has to rush you down while you're attacking them from a distance. But piercing blood wouldn't be the only option to use when it comes to ranged combat, because with blood manipulation, you still have more options. For instance, Noritoshi manipulates his blood into the form of a saw, and then he chucks it at his opponents. It could be as useful as a kunai in a situation, because you would have a lot of wiggle room to throw that ranged object in a short amount of time. And with blood manipulation, you can control whatever your blood touches. So essentially, what Noritoshi does while using a bow and arrow, he puts blotches of his blood onto an arrow that he shoots with his bow, and this causes him to be able to remotely control each arrow fired from his bow. And this is all possible due to his blood being on the arrow. So once an arrow is fired, it can cut corners, follow you, and not only that, but I can attack you with 3 arrows at a single time. This would not be possible because each arrow would be able to attack you from different directions. One could attack you from above, one could attack you from behind, and another arrow would be aimed directly at your face. And this allows me to cover multiple options with one attack. And with this being said, blood manipulation has crazy offensive capabilities. So rather than just putting my blood on an arrow, imagine if I put it on a bullet and then put it into a gun. Or if I put my blood onto a tomahawk and I chucked it at you, or anything in general. Blood manipulation is a power that should not be underestimated in the slightest, because blood manipulation can also bind opponents. I can make it so you can no longer move in a fight if I use red shackles. And with red shackles, blood entangles its opponent and no longer allows them to move. It essentially wraps around them like a rope or a web, so to speak. You essentially trap your opponents with your blood. And another form of blood manipulation that can be used as a trap is called supernova. With supernova, I'd like to think that the blood shoots up like a bouncing Betty essentially, But with supernova, blood that has been focused to a single point expands outwards and spreads like a shotgun shell into its opponents. And blood manipulation doesn't only affect its opponents, but it can also affect its user. By using red phosphorus, a blood manipulator can control their pulse, the number of red blood cells in their body temperature, and their overall blood composition. It's all under their complete control. And to put this in gaming terms, essentially a blood manipulator would be buffing themselves, just like in an RPG. Overall speed and power is increased to another level. And with Blood Edge, you could essentially create your own blood weapon. And this happens through a process that involves shaping and strengthening the blood by rotating it at a high speed. And when it comes to shaping and strengthening your own blood, it does not stop there, because with Blood Meteorite, you can harden the blood that is inside or outside your body. And this allows for a lot of potential when it comes to defensive capabilities, because when someone is trying to hit you, you can feint them out by hardening the inside of the blood of where your opponent is attacking you. And this will make your opponent's attack useless. And this will all be thanks to increasing your durability through Blood Meteorite. And the potential doesn't end there, because with Blood Meteorite, you can also use it for offensive capabilities by hardening the blood on the inside of your body and using it to affect your limbs. For instance, when Choso uses Blood Meteorite on one of his limbs and he attacks Yuji, he's able to take off a piece of his shoulder. If he hadn't used Blood Meteorite, this would not have been possible. And as I mentioned before, using blood is a double-edged sword, because by using Blood Meteorite, Choso can get thrombosis, and this will form blood clots throughout his blood vessels, and this will prevent his blood from flowing. This essentially clogs the body and prevents you from using blood. Blood manipulation literally has endless potential.